Hello Earthlings, Neutron Sound here. Album review time has reared its head for the fourth week in a row, and I can hardly wait to get back to posting music next week. But today I will be examining the new Kendrick Lamar release, Untitled Unmastered. This is basically a collection of 8 tracks that have been untitled or detitled, kind of like what Cee-Lo did on their third album. Kendrick is obviously massively influenced by Cee-Lo. I mean, you can just listen to any of his songs and you think, hey, this sounds exactly like Cee-Lo. Of course not. But the concept is slightly similar, if not completely different. Anyway, these are 8 untitled or detitled tracks that were conceived and or recorded during the making of last year's masterpiece, To Pimp a Butterfly. Let's get to the music. Track 1 starts off with Kendrick aping Barry White. Just flat out aping Barry White. There's a sort of atmospheric jam going on in the background while he does some sexy talk in a really low-pitched voice, like this. But then the groove starts to kick in and he begins rapping proper about how he made To Pimp a Butterfly so that he could use his voice to save humanity, or be one of the voices that saved humanity. Although this track was apparently conceived back in 2014, so I guess he knew it was going to be a masterpiece. Sometimes artists have that sort of extra sensory thing going on. And then the groove sort of falls apart again at the end. There's a light switch which sort of transitions us into the next track. Pimp, pimp, hooray! Track 2 sort of continues the theme of 2-pab. That's what I'm going to be calling To Pimp a Butterfly. It would be Tupac if it were a caterpillar, but it's a butterfly, so it's 2-pab. And Kendrick's lyrics get really dark and highlight the racial tension in America. Not just tension, but also injustice in America, where he sees jigaboos and styrofoams everywhere. He sort of half sings it in a sort of black grandma voice, and he's just great at playing different characters with different voices. He also has more than a bit of a preacher's tone on this track. There are a couple other characters, a couple other flows he uses. I actually like how at one point how this song has a triplet feel, but at one point he sort of deliberately switches his flow to a 16th note flow. And I really like the ensuing polyrhythm that springs from using a 16th note flow over a beat in triplets. And it's definitely a conscious choice by Kendrick. Not like when Eminem was doing We Made You, which had a shuffle feel, but he still rapped in 16th notes. I don't think that was a conscious choice. I just don't think Eminem can rap in triplets. But Kendrick definitely can, as he does for most of this track. And I also like how they included a bit of him conducting the rehearsal at the end. Track 3 is a shortened version of a song he performed on the Colbert Report as the final musical guest of that show. And I have to say, I much prefer that version than the one here, because the one here is noticeably shorter. It's missing the refrain at the end about how we don't die, we multiply. But it could easily be the equivalent of a hit single from this album, considering this album is just a bunch of B-sides recorded in a slightly worse quality than To Pimp a Butterfly. Track 3 here could be a parallel to the single version of I, whereas the live performance on the Colbert Report would be a parallel to the album version of I, because it works so much better live. Although I actually prefer the studio version to the live version of I. But I prefer the live version of track 3. Track 4 is a trippy little interlude that features singer SZA, and it's a sort of protest song, sort of motivational song, about how the government misleads the youth and welfare don't mean wealth for you, But head is the future. Head meaning brains, education, developing the mind. Those with good minds are the future. And it's got some fast whispering by Kendrick in between the sung phrases, and some really psychedelic, trippy, synth, echo, vocal effect things at the end. Track 5 features guest vocals from Anna Wise, Punch, and J-Rock, and Ab-Soul as well, although he's not credited anywhere in the lyrics. Maybe he's Punch, I'm not familiar with his work. But the lyrics are entirely Kendrick's. The most striking thing about this track, at first, is Thundercats Baseline, which starts off in a 5/8 polyrhythm against a groove which is in 4/4, so which is of course an eargasm to this former prog head. Maybe I still am a prog head. I don't know. And the bass line also does some 3/4 polyrhythms during the verses, and the whole track is decorated by sax flourishes from Terrace Martin, which fly in and out, and they come back at the end where there's a lot of echo and reverb added to them, which makes a transition of sorts into the next track. But track 5 has another groove I'm really digging, along with track 3. Track 6 is the jazziest point on the album, and it's a duet with Cee-Lo, who sings the first verse and does the backup vocals in the chorus. I can explain. I think that may have been the song's title, if Kendrick had decided to title it. This song has one of my favorite lyrics on this compilation, which is "Both sides of me are evenly odd," which is a great pun. I like puns. But those of you who know me probably know that already. And it's definitely got the jazziest, funkiest groove on this album. It's a definite favorite. I don't usually actively seek out favorites on a compilation album, but this is a great groove. And I like how Kendrick brings in some salsa lyrics at the end as well. Track 7 is the longest on the album, and also took the longest to assemble. Over a period of 2 years, it was finished this year, and it's split into 3 parts. Part 1 starts off with the same Pimp Hooray voice sample that started off track 2, and it's kind of a parody of most wannabe street rappers today, but every 8 lines is punctuated by a refrain. Levitate, 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 e.g. rise above everything. The next section consists of a single long verse over a beat co-produced by 5-year-old Egypt Daoud, along with his more famous father Swiss Beats. It contains some classic hip-hop braggadocio lines. Kendrick really knows how to glorify himself while sounding less like Kanye and more like Rakim and Guru, and I want to say KRS-One, but I don't know if that would be accurate. I guess I'm thinking of KRS-One because they're both clearly spiritually conscious, although I guess Kendrick has a bit more of a sarcastic edge than KRS. And then part 3 is just Kendrick and Thundercat fucking around in the studio. Nothing serious. Kendrick's just clowning around all over the place with his lyrics. He actually reprises part of track 4 where he says the head is the future, and how the government doesn't want you to get smart. After that he starts clowning around and making all the guys laugh, and the quality of this song is very guided by voices. It's kind of like a more listenable outtake of Reflections in a Metal Whistle from their album English Little League. By the way, Guided by Voices have reunited with a new lineup. But anyway, back to Kendrick. This part is a nice outtake. It shows what Kendrick does when there's no mic in front of him. It shows a more manifest side to his sense of humor as well. And it's just nice to hear an outtake, because that's kind of when artists are really most themselves. And track 8 might be called Blue Faces, if it had a title. And it's got a great beat, Some great lyrics. The beat has a slight King Kunta flavor, although it also reminds me of Common's work a lot, in the sort of finding forever universal mind control period. I'm digging the self-reflection in the last verse, which kind of harkens back to The Blacker the Berry, where he said he's the biggest hypocrite of 2015. There's some spoken word from Thundercat to that effect about realizing how you're lucky in ways you don't realize. It's a fitting closer to this compilation album. And it ends with another Pimp Hooray! I don't know if I should have an overall feeling about this album because it is just a collection of outtakes. I mean, it's not just a collection, it's got some really good songs on it, but I don't know if they were necessarily meant to hang together as an album, despite the fact that some are referenced in others. But it's a nice bonus for those of us who wanted more of To Pimp a Butterfly. This is Neutron Sound signing off. Pimp Hooray! Go forth and be awesome.